I'd like to call to order the City of Davenport Plan and Zone Commission meeting of July 17th. I'd like to ask everybody in attendance to please turn off your cell phones. They do bleed over onto our audio track. I'd also like to ask anybody that wants to speak to identify yourself and try not to repeat what everybody else has stated. Also be courteous of those that you might not agree with. And any questions that you have, please address them at the commission, not at the petitioner or other people, or for that matter, staff. With that, I would like to have roll call for the public hearing.
Connell.
Present.
Hepner. Ingram.
Present.
Johnson.
Present.
Kelling.
Here.
Lammers is excused. Manus.
Here.
Med.
Here.
Quinn.
Here.
Reinhardt.
Here.
Tallman here. We have a quorum, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Tallman. First item on the agenda is public hearing for case number REZ 18-10, a request of Jessica Tuttle, Thompson Thrift Development Company, Inc., to rezone 24.27 acres located south of East 53rd Street and west of the City of Bettendorf border from R2 PUD, Low Density Residential District, Planned Unit Development, and PDD, Planned Development District, to R5M PUD, Medium Density Dwelling District, Planned Unit Development. Hi, Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioners, Ryan Rusnak, Community Planning, Economic Development. 2011, majority of the property was rezoned to R2 PUD. It's a residential zoning classification. And I'll kind of talk briefly. The commercial part and the residential part went concurrently in 2011, so we'll have to talk a little bit about them both, but they are separate requests. Among the conditions were limit the development to at least 50% detached single family. There was existing single family to the west, south, and east. Maximum density at that time was 5.32 acres. You had existing streets that were both in the city of Davenport and Bettendorf dead end into the property. Here is the location for the residential portion that your public hearing is for this evening. Here's the existing zoning map. As you can see, the development is PDD and R2 PUD. At the time, the depth of the commercial zoning was proposed to extend much further. Here's the comprehensive plan, and you can see that the future land use map mirrors the zoning. I can tell you when we did the future land use map update a couple years ago, we looked at this area and extended the regional commercial to that area. Residential general is really relatively homogeneous neighborhoods, but we do see that you have more intense uses that are closer to those edges of those neighborhoods. Especially along transportation corridors. Regional commercial, this is our most intense commercial zoning classification, and it's largely our large office complexes, big box, along major transportation corridors. As I mentioned, we are adjacent to the city of Bettendorf, and so this is the zoning map for the city of Bettendorf. We do have some commercial adjacent to 53rd and single-family residential to the south of that and to the east of the project. Here's the land use, low intensity urban for the residential development, and community commercial for the commercial corridor along 53rd. Hard to read, but this is the land use that was adopted in 2011. Kind of gives you an idea, and land use plans are associated with PDD zoning and the development to the south, but kind of laid out detention along this area. You had single-family residential to the south and to the west. You had these roadways connecting here and to the south, and then you had a connection here. There were buffers along this area here and buffers along here. Specified that there would be two-story commercial development in this location and one-story commercial development, so it would step down towards the residential developments and lower intensity uses as you get over to the edges. And so they are asking for a rezoning. The density would increase. Proposed is 24.7 feet. The existing streets that were to the south and to the east and west would not extend into the project. They would dead end, kind of remain as developed, so to speak. The development does warrant off-street site improvements. With any, and this is a planned unit development, just like a final development plan is required to ensure consistency with that which is approved with the zoning. Here is a concept. This is really what would be the final development plan that would come forward. That shows the layout and the configuration, shows you the locations of stormwater improvements and the layouts for the buildings. The petitioner is present, and I think they're going to give a much more formal presentation than I would. Just note that staff is suggesting that the final development plan and the rezoning move forward, just so that this commission knows that that's exactly what they intend to build. Here's a concept of the types of multifamily buildings that would be constructed. And again, a traffic analysis was done to determine what the residential and commercial impact to the adjacent network would be. It was suggested that a signal is required, and decelerations would be required. We're really looking at of how to assign those costs to the development and surrounding property owners. Improvements to the east driveway are not warranted for a decel lane, but deceleration lanes would be asked by the city nonetheless. The petitioner held 2 public hearings for this specific request. 78 notices were sent. The city has received 18 written protests. Signs were posted on the property, and certainly we would seek additional input through this public hearing. Issues that we've heard about is the compatibility of the proposed use with surrounding development, traffic impacts, particularly to East 53rd Street, stormwater management, how is the stormwater going to be managed and where it outflows, and really what has changed since 2011 to rezone the property again, really what's changed in the market. So subsequent to this public hearing, there would be a recommendation by the Plan and Zoning Commission on July 31st, and subsequently a Committee of the Whole public hearing on August 15th. Surrounding property owners would also be notified of that public hearing. That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ryan. Do commissioners have any questions at this time of staff? Commissioner Kelling.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ryan, what you at the end of your presentation, you make a point that dawned on me along the way here. What has changed to make this request come forward now today? And what has changed in the marketplace? What's changed about this parcel? Why are we entertaining it again?
Well, from a staff perspective, and I'm going to defer most of this to the petitioner, property hasn't been developed over these past years. And so there's a reason for that, whether that be the market or the price of the land, I'm not quite sure. But I would defer to the petitioner to fill you in of why they selected this land and why they feel that this area is suitable for this development.
Okay, thank you.
Any other commissioners at this time? Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.
Would the petitioner's representative or representatives like to step forward?
Good evening. Thank you for your time tonight. I'm Jessica Tuttle. I'm the Senior Director of Development for Watermark. We are a company under the Thompson Thrift Development umbrella. So we're here proposing this multifamily project to you, and we've prepared a presentation. If it's okay, we'd like to show you what we're proposing for this rezoning and ultimately for the development plan approval.
Would that be okay?
Oh, yes.
Yep. If you just want to use this, you can.
Perfect. Okay. So I will go through these slides. It's a similar presentation to the 2 presentations we did at our neighborhood meetings. And then if there's any questions at the end, don't hesitate to ask. I have a full team with me tonight. So Dave Engler, he is our Director of Acquisitions. He has an accounting background and knows our pro forma inside and out. So he's here to help me answer questions, as well as Pat Smith. He's our development manager. He's an engineer by background, so he actually used to design these sites, and now it's great to have him on our team. So just a company background. This is Paul Thrift and John Thompson. There are two owners. They started Thompson Thrift back in 1986. They were coming out of high school and actually had one of their parents co-sign on a mortgage for a house in Terre Haute, Indiana. They grew up in Terre Haute. It's about 4 hours east of here, and they started flipping houses at a very young age. They were successful with that and ultimately turned it into a retail company. So Thompson Thrift Retail Group is one of our sister companies. They've been doing work since 90s all the way through 2000. In 2008, when the economy took a dip, I think they were smart and decided to diversify. And so Watermark was born to do multifamily development and added that other company under Thompson Thrift. So Watermark is around 35 employees. Thompson Thrift is around 300. We also have a general contracting sister company. But with Watermark, all of our vice presidents have been with us since our first closing. So 2008 we were started. In 2010 we closed on our first project. So we really have a really nice team with a lot of experience who've done 35 projects since 2010. So we meet every Friday. As you can see, we have certain specialties. So we have acquisitions where they go and find the land, corporate development. We have a construction team who works as our owner's reps during construction. Property management we have in-house, and then we have financial and attorneys as part of the team. So here we wanted to show why we're here tonight. And really why we're here is we scour the country to look for sites that we think multifamily is needed. And so we think we found that here in Davenport, Iowa. And we found a site that meets our list of criteria. So our acquisitions team goes out and looks for sites that are near new retail, near high-end single-family housing, in good school systems, near major thoroughfares, and then sometimes we look for barriers to entry. That we really just want to make sure that there's not too much competition or too many units saturating the market. So this site meets all of those criteria, and so that's why we're in front of you tonight. Here's a list of all of the projects we've done. So it's around 35. It totals over 8,000 units that we've built to date. A lot of it's been in the Midwest. We're based out of, our headquarters is out of Terre Haute, but Watermark specifically is out of Indianapolis. So we've done a lot through the Midwest, a lot in Denver, and then a lot down in Texas. I'm currently also working on a project in Florida and then one up in Michigan, so we're adding those states to this list. So here's pictures of what we've built in the past. All of these pictures are actual Watermark projects, so you can go and visit them or look them up as well. What we're proposing is a 2-story product type here in Davenport. We also do a 3- and 4-story product type. It's higher density, it would get us more units, but we don't think that that's the right fit for this site with it being in close proximity to single family. So this is our specific floor plan where it shows 16 units in each building. 10 of those units have attached garages. So we get a lot of professionals that want to live in this type of luxury apartment. And so the attached garage really does well in submarkets like this, and especially with it being colder here in the winters. This is the first floor. So if you, let's say you lived in this A1 unit, you would drive into your garage, get out of your car, and walk straight into your unit. So there's no shared corridor. So it acts almost like a single family home where the security is there and you don't have to share a common corridor like you would see in a 3- or 4-story apartment project. Second floor, these are just units, 10 units on the second floor. Each of those units has its own private staircase. So when you access your unit from the exterior, you have your own private door. You'd walk up your own private staircase, you can paint it, hang pictures, and then you get directly into your unit. So we really think that this product type is going to be a nice transition between the single-family neighborhood and then the retail up on 53rd. Here's a rendering of our buildings that our architect put together. This is the garage side that Ryan showed earlier. It's nice board and batten, and then we're proposing stone to accent that board and batten. The board and batten is fiber cement, so it's a higher quality material than a vinyl siding. And then here's pictures of previous projects. This is in Zionsville, Indiana. This is a two-story, same two-story product. They really look like single-family neighborhoods once they're built, and then we're able to create pocket parks between the two buildings. These buildings have over 146 articulations, so they're actually very expensive to build. But because of the rent we're able to get with the attached garage and with this type of quality product, we're able to be successful in multiple markets. So again, board and batten is what you see here, and then stone material to accent that board and batten. Example site plan. I'm going to skip through this so I can show you our actual site plan here later tonight. This is the 3 and 4 story product type. We've done it in more urban locations, not what we're proposing for Davenport. The pool, this is an example of what we would do here. It's very high end, more like a hotel. They're 2,500 square foot pools, and then they have cabanas, 2 outdoor grills, outdoor dining, and then a transition area where it's like an outdoor patio into our clubhouse. Interior features. So we do all granite countertops, all stainless steel appliances. We do in-unit washer and dryer. And then they're open floor plans with very large layouts. This is an old picture, so all of these projects takes us 22 months to build a project. So what you're seeing is actually a project that's 3 or 4 years old by the time it gets through construction and entitlements. So it's exciting to see this quality, but I'm even more excited to see what we design today. Open floor plan. Bedroom. One of the changes that we do now, we do framed mirrors in the bathroom. So it's a little detail, but it really adds some quality in our bathrooms. Washer and dryer. And then community features. So these we'll probably get into more detail later, but we really tailor our community features to that specific market. Some markets we do green eggs, we do dog parks, we do community gardens. It's really what the city would like to see and what we think our residents would use. Clubhouse. The clubhouse has an interior kitchen and then a lounge room. They get used a lot for events and by our residents. Fire pits, we do them at every property, sometimes multiple fire pits. The string lights we've started to do. Again, I'm really excited to see what our architects come up with for this project. Grills. We'll have game room, fitness room. The fitness rooms are the largest that I've seen after I've toured other apartment projects. We do a really nice job in our fitness room. And then a bark park, we'll do that here in Davenport. A lot of residents like to have that option, and they register their dog, and there's certain rules where it has to be under a certain size. So then I wanted to flip through these really quickly. We worked with the neighbors. We had 2 different meetings, and I think they raised really good concerns at the first meeting. So when we came back to the second meeting, that's when we started addressing these questions. So the first was, how will multifamily development benefit the city? And so Dave reached out to John Deere, Genesis Healthcare, and then also Rock Island. And all 3 companies responded favorably to our project for recruiting efforts. So new multifamily will bring in a younger demographic and also help existing employers bring citizens to Davenport and let them stay here in Davenport. Younger demographic I mentioned, the largest age group that is renting is age 20 to 34. So we think by providing a multifamily here in Davenport, they'll choose to stay here instead of going to other communities. And then multifamily is taxed at a higher commercial tax rate than a single family development would be taxed at. School capacity, we always get asked this question. Multifamily, because of the resident, has less students than a single family development would bring. So here, this is just a statistic from Urban Land Institute. They do reports every year, but it would show that our project, considered a garden apartment, for every 100 units has around 21 children, whereas for a single family development for every 100 houses actually has 64 children. And I think the big thing here is Dave on our team also reached out to the Bettendorf School superintendent. There's been a lot of concerns about the capacity for the schools for this project, but he spoke with Michael Rasso, and Michael is able to confirm that there are no capacity problems for what we're proposing. Traffic, as Ryan mentioned, we'll be doing a new signal and then 2 turn lanes at the west entrance. That was warranted by our traffic engineer. And then the city has asked us to also do turn lanes at our eastern entrance. So we're working with them on that, and then we'll go above and beyond standards to add those turn lanes to make sure 53rd still operates actually at a higher capacity than it does today with those additions. Property values. So this came from that same report from Urban Land Institute. This shows that they did a study, and properties that are near multifamily actually had an increase in their property value of 2.9, where other properties in that same community not near multifamily only had an increase of 2.6. So the reasons for this that they point to is, first, apartments themselves are an indicator that an area's economy is vibrant and growing, so it attracts people. Second, multifamily housing may increase the pool of potential home buyers, so existing owners have more buyers when they go to sell. And then lastly, and this is what we really look for all of our sites, is that multifamily attracts, makes the communities more attractive by usually having higher density means more retail options and more amenities within that community. Here's our rental rates. It was brought up of how does our rent compare to other projects, and is there a resident here that would pay that for rent? So if you look at per square foot, Watermark's at the bottom. For one bed, we're $142 to $1.73 per square foot. This is very in line with the other projects here. The Springs is already built, and then the Bridges lofts. These are the numbers they're projecting. 2-bedroom, we're right in line with the Springs, as well as 3-bedroom. We're a little bit conservative for 3-bedroom. Springs is occupied, so we believe there's residents out there who will want to rent our apartments. Then lastly, are we good neighbors? There were a lot of back and forth. We're actually on our 6th iteration of our site plan. So we've worked closely with our engineer and with our architect to really not only customize our buildings, but change the site layout to pull our buildings away from the neighbors and try to screen as much as possible. So this shows what's required by code is a 5-foot side setback and a 30-foot rear setback. What we have provided is over 100 feet on the sides, over 40 feet on the rear to the parking lot, but it's over 100 feet to the buildings. And then there were concerns about drainage. We have ponds on the west and east side of our site. So let me show you. And there were concerns about if a wet pond were built, how safe is that for the neighborhoods? So we've switched and had our engineer design for dry ponds. So the only time there'll be water in these basins is when it rains. Screening was a big concern. So here We've added landscape buffers around the entire property. It's over 100 feet to our buildings on the sides, so we'll really get a good opportunity to screen. And then we've also, instead of doing a black ornamental fence that's see-through, we've upgraded to a opaque vinyl fence, so you won't be able to see through the fence if you're backed up along our property line. Zoomed in, so we're doing 19 buildings total, 304 units. It's a density of about 12.5 units per acre. So as you drive in, you'll drive in off of 53rd. You'll come through our shared access drive on either the west end or the east end. The community will be gated, so there'll be vehicular gates that you'll have to use your badge to get through. But in the day, it'll be open. You can get into this parking lot, and then the gate will be past that parking lot, so future tenants can come to our clubhouse and our leasing office. The pool and the amenity space is tucked to the interior of the site, as well as our dog park will be tucked on the interior portions of the site. Then we'll have loops through the site for emergency access. Public sanitary is being built through our site, and then our storm outfalls to existing outfall points currently. Here's exhibits of what you would look at if you were a neighbor. I think this really helps the neighbors visualize what we're doing. But basically, if you're on the west property line, then you would see a small berm with landscaping, that dry landscape stormwater basin, and then additional landscaping before you would ever get to one of our proposed buildings. We think this is really good use of the space and provides good transition buffer. Rather than maybe like a loading dock being backed up to a property, I think this is a really good transition from single family to retail. So that's what we're proposing, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Jessica. Commissioners, have any questions at this time? Seeing none, I appreciate it. Would anybody else in the audience like to speak in favor of the petition? If so, please step forward. Would anybody like to speak in opposition to the petition? Please step forward and identify yourself.
My name is Carol Holmes. I live at 4919 Hamilton, which is on the west side of this proposed. Mainly, I have some questions because we've lived in our property for 34 years. We didn't know anything about these first two meetings. So maybe some of these questions were answered and I just don't know about it. There is a creek that runs on the west side of the proposed property and the east side of Hamilton Drive. And it goes down then through Bettendorf, and there's a culvert. There are a couple different culverts, and there's one that goes under Crow Creek. And usually there's nothing in there, trickle or something. But when there's a big rain, it is, and I'm not exaggerating, 40 feet wide of raging water. Now, my personal property sits up high enough, it doesn't come into our yard, but I think down a little further it might. And I'm wondering if any consideration has been given to the city of Davenport or Bettendorf to see what the capacity is for their culverts, to see if this, there probably will be more water because there's more concrete, to see what the capacity of the culverts is on down, because there are a lot of houses that are a lot closer to the creek than my property. I was actually glad to see that there were some dry, I forget what they call it, stormwater things. And so that's my main concern, is the flooding. Actually, some of this looks beautiful. I could probably, answer that one of the reasons that property hasn't been developed is because the person who owns it has been asking an exorbitant amount of money and just recently lowered that amount, which is still high probably for that property. So anyway, that's my main concern, is the flooding and on down through that creek area in Bettendorf. Because, we're right on that border. Crow Creek's the dividing line between Davenport and Bettendorf. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Ryan, would you or the petitioner like to discuss? I know there's a lot of criteria that's involved with stormwater detention and runoff at a certain rate. We've talked about it in the past. Can we lightly discuss this again?
Because I can just speak in general terms, you probably want to get a little bit more specific. I'd probably ask Eric to address that.
Okay, that's fine.
Eric Longlet, Engineering Manager for the city. Excuse me. With this, we are currently in the process of reviewing the plans that the developer has submitted. We'll have comments on that. To answer your question, Mr. Chairman, we have a new stormwater ordinance, and with that, what is required would be with their dry ponds, they'd have to hold a 100-year storm with the storage rate, and then release at a what would eventually be a 2-year runoff, what would be currently like what it is, prairie grass, type of a C factor is what it's called, so that what the release rate would be a 2-year rainfall, or about a 1.5-inch rainfall, compared to a 100-year rainfall rate, which is around 6.5 inches, I think, off the top of my head. So they would have to submit to our natural resources and to engineering that they meet all that criteria with new stormwater ordinance. And then to follow up with Bettendorf, those plans will also be reviewed by Bettendorf, because the stormwater does track into that city.
Thank you, Eric. Commissioner Kelling.
Thank you. Could I ask Jessica to come back up? I guess I'm burning with desire to find out why you think this property hasn't sold up for the last 8 years. I was on this commission when we first entertained this, and the same controversy existed then as it does now. But nevertheless, the market conditions are quite good. This is a fine piece of real estate, centrally located for all the reasons. But why do you think it hasn't sold?
Sure. So I guess before I answer, I am an engineer by background, so real estate questions probably aren't the best for me. I've been with Watermark for 2 years. I can say that the cost of construction continues to just skyrocket, and so single-family developers are seeing that as well. So likely with the high cost of construction and the high cost of the land, it just really hasn't made sense to develop this into single-family like it was proposed. Market conditions always drive that. And maybe, Dave, do you have anything else to add?
Do you now own this, or is your ownership pending approval of the zoning?
It is pending approval of the zoning. We're under contract with Ms. Sophie Foster currently.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you. I have a couple quick questions for you. Quick, is there on-site management at the property?
There is. So management is, we have one full-time person per 100 tenants. So here we would have at least 3, I've been told, maybe 4 full-time property managers, as well as 3 full-time maintenance staff. So we'll do all of the maintenance, fence, pond, internal utilities, and drive.
Okay. And then also, do you put any reserves aside for exterior updates, like down the road in 20 years, that stone and board may not be as lovely?
Absolutely. Yeah, one thing that makes us successful is how our product looks when residents come in the door. So there's an annual maintenance budget that we've budgeted out every year. It's for exterior upkeep. The board and batten we use has a 30-year warranty. It holds up very well, but we do make sure everything on our property is in really good condition. And it's how we get leases.
But I'm saying aside from maintenance, like down the road, and I know that it's been since '86. If you've ever had to remodel the exterior of a property, I just think about development down the future and it having an aged look.
From an accounting standpoint, we carry $150 per unit.
Could you please step up to the microphone?
Thanks for the question. The direct answer is $150 per unit, and that's basically irrespective of the market that we operate in. We just keep that in a reserve for, it's like a rainy day fund, but it accrues over time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Would anybody else like to step forward and speak in opposition?
Hi, my name is Kathy Hetrick, and I live at 5166 Davenport in Bettendorf. And one of my big concerns is, in 2011, we went through this whole process, and we had to fight to get it to where it was, and that was a big compromise. It wasn't what we wanted, but we agreed. Well, we didn't have a choice but to agree. Now we're doing this again, and I'm wondering why we have to go through this again. And I'm wondering, okay, they say they're going to do 2 levels, and that's all they're going to do. And I don't have any reason not to believe you guys. But what's to say, oh, they get started, and, well, they want to add another level to their buildings, or a couple of levels.
They can't. Once they submit their plan, it's locked in.
They can't go through this whole process all over again.
It'll be a locked-in deal.
Okay. Well, I guess my big concern is we did fight for this. We fought to have housing on the outside and then multi-family homes on the inside, and I would really like to see it stay that way. There's a reason why we fought for that. We're the homeowners. This is our neighborhood, and I would just like to see that be honored. Thank you.
Thank you. Next. Step forward.
Hello, my name is Barry Winkler. I live on the southeast corner of Davenport in Bettendorf, 4978. I have filed a protest because I have a few concerns with this property. Let me start with the companies. I can understand why some companies may want this. I work for John Deere. I can understand that. I'm an attorney there. We have lots of people come in, but I can say where the demand is not in apartments. I mean, all we have to do is drive out to the north end of Bettendorf, and we see an explosion of housing. Demand is single-family homes. I was not here in 2011, and others have already spoke to that. I did go to all the planning meetings. This is now the 3rd new plan I've seen, and our concern at those meetings, as well as this one, is the plan continues to change. Will we ever get to speak maybe to the final plan? And you can answer that at the end. I'll keep going here. The other thing I wanted to talk about is schools. Excuse me. There was a reference that the children that are in 100 apartments don't match or equal what's in 100 homes. I don't dispute that. But you can't put 100 homes at the same place where you can put 100 apartments. In this 25-acre lot, obviously the number of apartments is going to be much greater than single-family homes. I still, the question that we've asked at the other meetings, and I continue to ask, is really try to get down to that why. And I don't understand why this cannot be single-family homes that is consistent with the neighborhood. The plan in 2011, I thought, that's a great plan. One of the reasons when we just bought in our home in 2014, was that plan fits and is consistent with the neighborhood and the community. Including that front commercial strip. The school, I can't speak to the entire school, but my children go to Paul Norton. Paul Norton is the school right there, which is a Bettendorf school. Obviously, you guys and women understand that this area is Davenport City, but Bettendorf schools. But Paul Norton is over capacity. There is no room at that school, so I mean, I don't want to refute what the superintendent said, but I don't see where this capacity is, and it's definitely not in a neighborhood school. These apartments may look very, very nice, and I know there's several going up. There's 2 other ones going up on Devil's Glen. There's another one that went up north of Walmart. So I have a little question there on the demand really for apartments as opposed to single-family dwellings. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
My name is Brian Morrissey. I live at 5137 Hamilton Court. Couple things. My wife was here. She had to leave. She's a police officer in Bettendorf, has been for the past 18 and a half years. She asked me to raise up some issues here. The Springs development they're putting up over there in Bettendorf, they have seen increased police calls for noise problems and traffic problems, and I want to encourage you to verify that information to find out how much it has increased the police presence with noise complaints, because that's going to be coming to our backyards. The traffic problems, I would encourage you to look at how many more traffic accidents have happened, in particular in the area of 53rd and Utica. We know that that's a major intersection. It's hard enough now to traverse that area. It's only going to multiply, as common sense would dictate. The other thing is, I'll back up what he said, and I will refute what the superintendent said, because I have 2 young girls that we just moved into the neighborhood in November. We can't get into Paul Norton, and that is walking distance from our house. We most likely will have 2 children, one in first grade, one in kindergarten, going to 2 separate elementary schools, because Paul Norton, we can't get in. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Next. Would anybody else like to speak?
My name is Lori Hughes, and I live at 5143 Hamilton Court, and we've been there for 18 years, and we love our neighborhood, and I'd just like to support what the last 2 gentlemen, I actually live right next to Ryan. Our kids are out of Paul Norton, but I know that there are children besides him that have not been able to get into Paul Norton. I also know that right now, I don't know what traffic studies they're citing, but getting out of Amesbury, where you get onto 53rd, is a nightmare. Usually if you're going out at about 6:30 in the morning, you're okay. Anytime after that, the early morning hours or the afternoon from 2 o'clock till about 6 o'clock, you can wait for 2-3 minutes at the intersection of Amesbury and 53rd. And I cannot imagine that if there's 300 apartments with, let's say, at least 1 car apiece, 300 more cars coming and going 1 block away, that traffic's not going to get worse. I'd also like to address the cost of the apartments. They cited numbers in square feet, and I would encourage you to ask them what their monthly proposed rents are, because when they told us their proposed rents, I can tell you my mortgage is far less for my home than their rents are for their apartments. And I'm not sure, I think the people who live in Davenport and Bettendorf are pretty common sense people. I think people who come to the area are looking for new houses that are affordable. And if you're gonna spend $1,800 a month on living, I think most people would prefer to put that towards a home. So I'd encourage you to ask them what their proposed rents are. Thank you.
Thank you. Next. Seeing none, commissioners?
My name is Michael Ryan. I'm at 4646 East 49th Court, so this is literally in my backyard. And I want to say, number one, I really like the look and feel. I think this is a great development for Davenport. I just really think that this is the wrong place for it. And largely due to those traffic studies. I actually downloaded the agenda and the green sheets for tonight and went through, and I saw there's 20, 30 pages of traffic notes. And I went through those, and lots of information in there. But the one thing I didn't really see in there is how long does it take to get from 18th Street in Bettendorf to get through the intersection at Utica Ridge. I frequently avoid that intersection specifically because I know that during peak hours, I can sit through 4, 5, even 6 traffic cycles to try to get through there. It's a nightmare to get in there. There's lots of numbers, but I think I would really encourage you to translate those numbers into actual impact on people and the traffic. Speaking to the person that had a wife that's a traffic or a police officer, she's noticed increased accidents in that area. And if you take a look at the amount of additional traffic that we're going to be putting in there, that's only going to increase the amount of accidents, increase the amount of congestion there. I think looking at just the bare numbers doesn't really tell the whole story. Speaking again to the area that it's actually in, that they've chosen, I think there are better areas that probably meet their criteria just as well that are more appropriate. This is tightly bounded on all 3 sides by light residential. There are areas that are closer to Veterans Memorial Parkway that don't have that same sort of limitation, so it's easier for them to get into that separation that they were talking about, while also being on what is intended by the city to be a new collector street. So I would really encourage you to kind of take a look at the traffic and also the positioning of it. I know we can't as a city tell them where they have to build, but we do have the ability to say, look, your development isn't appropriate in that location. Maybe you need to find another place. Thank you.
Thank you. Next. Commissioner Kelling.
Mr. Chairman, are this petition and the next petition we entertain tonight, are they in any way connected?
Yes, they are. One will not go independent of the other.
All right. So if we reject this petition, then the second petition cannot go forward?
That's the understanding of the developer, that the land deal will not happen.
Okay. Thank you.
Any additional questions? Any additional people like to speak? Seeing none, we will close case number REZ 18-10 for discussion. It will be back in front of us August 31st, if I remember correctly. July 31st. I'm a month out of whack. To make a vote. Next item is public hearing for case number REZ 18-11, request of Kevin Kellner, Build to Suit Inc., for the rezoning of 14.48 acres, more or less, located south of East 53rd and west of the Bettendorf city limits from R2 PUD, Low Density Residential District Planned Unit Development, to PDD, Planned Development District, with a new land use plan for the entire property. Ryan
Rusnak, Community Planning. I'll hopefully not cover too much repetitive information, but I'm sure I will. The actual rezoning for the commercial portion is for the southeast and southwest corners. However, a new land use plan is associated with that PDD zoning, and therefore it's akin to a rezoning. The land use plan calls for, as I mentioned earlier, commercial development, but really had proposed them in larger buildings. New land use plan calls for a mixture of retail, office, and restaurant, similar uses in smaller buildings. There's really no pending development at this time, so there's really no Final development plan similar to the other one to show you. Final development plans, if approved, would come at a later time. Again, location map, existing zoning, PDD, shows you the two areas in the southwest and southeast that are being zone changed. Comprehensive plan, again, regional commercial in this location. Residential general, as I mentioned, relatively homogeneous neighborhoods with higher intensity uses, closer to those edges. Certainly staff views East 53rd as being an edge. Here's the residential, residential general, and then there's the residential commercial. Existing Bettendorf again in the comprehensive plan. Here's the land use plan that's been proposed. Really associated use table. Gets very challenging to show buildings. Kevin Keller has shown us a concept plan of how they would anticipate the site being developed. But those are challenging sometimes because it might paint yourself into a corner, or somebody might say, I saw a concept plan and why are you doing things slightly different? So what we did discuss is breaking these out into different areas and creating a use table that lists what those uses would be, maximum building area and square footage of impervious surface area, and locations for 1- and 2-story buildings. This would be tied to the zoning. That would move forward. You do see the general location, which is consistent of the roadway network extending to the residential units to the south. So these roadway networks and associated land use, and those would all be tied to the zoning. Again, similar requests. 2 neighborhood meetings were held. Notices were sent to 25 property owners. Again, this is just the northern portion. 3 written protests were received, and again, seeking additional input at this public hearing. Similar issues, traffic studies, land use compatibility, stormwater management. I think they'll be similar to the ones we heard earlier. Next step, same. It would be in front of the Plan and Zoning Commission on the 31st and Committee of the Whole on the 15th. And I know the petitioner is here also, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Commissioners, any questions at this time? Seeing none, would the petitioner like to step forward and tell us about your project?
My name is Kevin Kellner. I'm with Build to Suit. And as Ryan stated, this is preliminary. The uses that we're looking at are primarily office, retail, restaurant. And given where we're at with the project, we can't take the plan a whole lot further than that right now. So in discussions with Ryan and Matt, we tried to lay out the uses and be respectful of particularly the west boundary with the single family. As you can notice on the southeast corner, we're using the outlot with the stormwater retention as a buffer there. A and G lots would be treated similar to the lots that we developed east of American Bank, which are now 2 twin buildings. They're the Unity Point clinics, and we had a similar setting there with the single-family residential behind that. And so we took those same principles from that particular use and zoning that we went through and applied them to lots A and G here. Similarly, the interior lots, which would be B, C, D, H, and I, we would try to do anything in there 2 stories. I don't know that we'll do a single building 2 stories, to be honest with you, but if we did, we would do it on the center portion just to try and, keep it interior, just like the apartments are going to be interior as far as possible. We would do that with 2-story construction as well. So I think what you would see there if we were able to develop the project is pretty similar to what you see if you drive up and down Utica and 53rd Street in terms of, shop space and office space and service retail type uses.
Thank you, Kevin. Commissioners, any questions of the petitioner? Seeing none, would anybody like to speak in favor of the petition? Seeing none, would anybody like to speak in opposition? If so, please step forward. Seeing none, commissioners, any final questions? Commissioner Med.
Thank you. Could you walk us through, Ryan, the connection of these two again? I didn't understand that.
Well, I believe what they've done is partnered up. One has a contract on a portion of the development and for the commercial portion, and the other is more of a multifamily development. And so they are working together to see if they can get these properties rezoned to really kind of develop in concert. And I think, as I understand, the residential developer is looking to have these amenities close to where their use is.
Okay, thanks.
Any additional questions? Seeing none, that too will close public hearing for case number REZ 18-11. It too will return on July 31st. That being said, we will move on to our regular meeting. Roll call, please. Speak in regard to what? Well, I think I gave plenty of opportunity for people to speak before. You will be able to speak at the next meeting. Thank you. Roll call, please.
Connell.
Present.
Ingram.
Present.
Johnson.
Present.
Kelly.
Here.
Lammer's excused. Manus.
Here.
Med.
Here.
Quinn.
Here.
Reinhardt.
Here.
Tallman, we have a quorum, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner Tallman, report of city council activity.
Nothing to report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ryan. Secretary's report.
Second.
Secretary's report has been moved as written. All in favor signify by aye. Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, it will stay as written. Report of the Comp Plan Committee. Ryan?
Just that we have finally getting ready to roll out the draft zoning ordinance and map. So we're having a series of public open houses August 1st, 4 to 5 p.m., council chambers. August 2nd, 9 to 2, Public Works. August 2nd, 5 to 7 at the Freight House. August 3rd, 7:30 to 9:30 at the AM at the QC Chamber to hopefully connect with some of that business community. Certainly people can keep updated at davenportzoning.com for the latest and greatest of the new zoning ordinance. Thank you.
Ryan, I'd like to throw kudos out to Jessica for sending out what she did. And I think that was nice of her to get it out in front of us. And I would encourage everybody to take a look at the 205-page report. I've spent a considerable amount of time looking through it and doing some highlighting. I think it's pretty well put together. I like what Commerce has done. I look forward to it getting out in front of the public and seeing if we can get a finished product. Moving on, zoning activity, old business, Commissioner Tallman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one case this evening. That's case number REZ 18-09. Request by Jared Engler, McCarthy Bush, Inc. to rezone 8.134 acres more or less of property located east of Utica Ridge Road and north of East 56th Street from CO Office Shop District to C2 General Commercial District. That's not right, is it? Should I keep going? Because your recommendation is...
Yeah, there's been a request and change from the petitioner.
Okay, so, all right. Staff recommends the Planning and Zoning Commission accept the findings and forward case number REZ 18-09 to City Council with a recommendation to rezone only proposed Lot 1 to C1 Neighborhood Shopping District with the use restrictions listed above, and I would so move.
Second.
Case number REZ 18-09 has been moved and seconded for discussion. Commissioner Quinn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be abstaining from this case.
Thank you. Ryan?
Thank you. Ryan Rusnak, Community Planning. As you mentioned, Commissioner Tallman, the petitioner requested a tabling at the July 2nd, 2018 Plan and Zoning Commission meeting. And they did so in order to meet with some of the neighborhood and offer some alternatives. You may recall at that meeting, staff was recommending denial of the request. That meeting was held on July 11th, and there was a suggestion to limit the zoning to C1 and scale back the location of that zoning and include some use restrictions in that. C1 is a neighborhood shopping district that offers limits on the number of uses. It did appear several people in the neighborhood were receptive to that change, but we may hear otherwise tonight or in favor. Here was the original location of the request. This was what was being proposed to be C2. Here is the future land use map. Again, residential general for the entire property. Here is an existing zoning map, shows the majority of the property is CO, which is office shop district, and a very small portion being zone C2 along 56th. And again, we talked about residential general a lot, quite a bit. Tends to be relatively homogeneous neighborhoods with higher intensity uses closer to those neighborhood edges. And I think one could make the argument that an edge could be right here along Utica Ridge Road. Here's the regional commercial, which is to the south of the property, but this is that area that extends up from East 53rd. Here's the location of Lot 1. It is on your future business to subdivide the property, so we've asked the petitioner to provide us with a legal description for Lot 1 so that could be advertised, but they have essentially withdrawn the request for the remainder of the property being C2 and limited and altered the zoning request to C1 and limited to just this portion of the property here. And here's a concept plan of what the proposed development would look like. Findings that rezoning Lot 1 to C1 allows the development to proceed and protect the neighborhood by maintaining the CO office shop district adjacent to the residential properties. And secondly, the proposed rezoning is consistent with the comprehensive plan because it limits that commercial development closer to that edge. So staff, similar to the East 53rd rezoning for the Portillos, feel that commercial development towards the edge achieves consistency with that future land use designation. Here are the use restrictions that Commissioner Tallman had referenced. We would ask that this be part of the recommendation for approval and that these be included in the rezoning ordinance that City Council would consider. And so staff did recommend approval of the request as modified to just Lot 1 or future Lot 1 and subject to these use restrictions which are currently listed in the C1 district. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ryan. Commissioners have any questions? Commissioner Johnson?
Do you know if the, petitioner has a proposed tenant, a C1 tenant that they have in mind that this is necessary?
It was my understanding that they did not, other than the initial tenant that they had.
Okay.
Thank you, Ryan. Would anybody from the audience like to speak in favor or opposition? Please step forward and identify yourself.
My name is Jim Payne, and I'm the president of the Villas of Crow Valley Neighborhood Association. The opinions I want to express are mine solely. They don't represent that of the board of directors nor any of the other residents in this room. I wish to state that I support the amended position as is. I also support additional restrictions being placed on future restaurants and bars that may be contained in this parcel, if most Crow Valley Village residents also favor those restrictions. Looking forward, I'm firmly opposed to any potential future efforts made by the developer to rezone remaining lots in the area from a CO district. I believe these remaining lots are too close to the villas, and a rezoned C1 or C2 district in this area would not be harmonious with the surrounding beautiful and peaceful neighborhoods. Thank you.
Well, just to be clear, we're not here to vote on the surrounding CO property at this time. We're only concerned about, I just wanted to make sure you understood.
I look at this as a reasonable compromise, a one-off, so to speak, and that I just want to go on record that I firmly oppose any future rezoning.
Thank you. Next.
Good evening. I'm Travis Unterzuber. I am a resident of the Lakehurst Addition. So while this is not in my backyard, this is definitely in my neighborhood. And we have lived in that area for over 17 years, always expecting and understanding this was C0. We were expecting eventually it would develop that way. And I have to echo Commissioner Kelling's comment earlier. I really have not seen any evidence of what has changed in the marketplace that creates a compelling case for, I was surprised even, and maybe it was a negotiating tactic to go for C2, and now we're back down to C1, but only a portion of C1 and a restricted. I've not seen the case that drove that request necessarily. I also am concerned because I feel like this creates a very special zoning in two ways. I will, as a side comment, say thank you to Ryan and the office for working with the neighbors and coming to a compromise. But when I look at this compromise, I feel like for this one lot, the city of Davenport is creating a special category, whether you call it C0 plus or C1 minus, or I'd maybe call it C0.5. And I'm wondering, have we really created a situation where we're starting to get to the point that we're creating special zoning for a lot, hopefully for a purpose? My other concern is that subdividing this existing parcel, will there be sufficient land left that it can be economically developed as C0? Or will we end up back here again looking at C0.6 maybe? So I almost look at this and I say, is this almost a variance? Although I know there's no hardship shown, so there's really no way to go to the variance group. And I agree it does not meet the legal definition of spot zoning, but it sure tends to have the nuances of that. So I feel like this is not only a use that none of us in the neighborhood expected, we're setting precedents that will create future issues for the remaining properties as well as other uses for this lot. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Hi, I'm Jared Engler with McCarthy Improvement and Bush Construction. First, I want to thank Brian and Matt Flynn with the city for working with us to come up with a good compromise on this project. Originally, we had proposed a C2 development, and really that was because everything south of 56th Street was currently or is currently a C2 development, and actually a sliver of our property is currently C2. So we thought just to continue with that and go with C2, we thought was a good way to go. And as, again, talking with the city and working through that, we really don't need C2 for our proposed development. So we felt that through this process, going to a C1 would be a good compromise. And then after we had our neighborhood meeting, it was a really good collaborative effort with the neighbors. I also want to thank the neighbors for their input. We had about a 2-hour meeting with them. A lot of back and forth, a lot of good dialogue about things that we could do to help this development be a benefit to everyone. And I think what we came up with by going to C1 and talking about some things that we could pare out of the development, some things that we have no intention of ever developing there or putting on the property, I think would be a good win for everyone to pare out. So that's why we came up with that comprehensive list of properties that we would add to the development and say that we would leave off. So we've got a covenant already in place on that master development when the whole commercial office park was built. So it was an easy way to add those to our covenant and then also have them be added to the approval of this property. So
Thank you, Jared.
yep, appreciate it.
Next.
Good
Good evening. I'm Patricia Harris. I live at 4219 East 58th Street. And again, I am, as my neighbor Jim Payne, speaking as an individual homeowner. We really didn't have much opportunity to have any homeowner feedback, so I do respectfully request that the Plan and Zoning Commission vote to forward case number REZ 1809 to the City Council with a recommendation for denial, and I will explain why I'm of that view. When McCarthy Bush Corporation initially proposed its amendment to its zoning request at a second neighborhood meeting last week, from the original request to rezone approximately 8 acres from C0 to C2, to rezoning only the Pure Hair Studio Lot Number 1 from C0 to C1, I asked its CEO, Greg Bush, is that it? Are we done? Will McCarthy Bush commit that it will not later request the remaining lots to be changed to C1? And he said no. He is not willing to make that commitment. Whether he is or isn't, I will say at that meeting it was the dance of three veils. We started with a suggestion that McCarthy Bush acknowledged they heard homeowners at the Villas of Crow Valley loudly and clearly express their strong objection to having those lots in the original subject property, which directly abut many of our residential units, including mine, be rezoned to C2. That was in addition to the overwhelming public input opposition in written form to the city staff prior to the city staff's recommendation that the petition be denied. McCarthy Bush's first fallback at last week's meeting was changing the request from C2 to C1. However, our residents indicated they did not consider C1 to be appreciably better than C2. McCarthy Bush's second fallback was editing out more pernicious uses like a funeral home, a service station, or a used car lot. Again, our residents indicated that some of their strongest objections were to a restaurant or a tavern. Those are two of the three complementary uses that Pure Hair Studio has indicated it wants, and it certainly seems needs to keep its options open and make a go of its expanded, relocated hairstyling business, which is a C0 use. The third fallback late in the meeting was to request C1 only for the Pure Hair Studio lot. From my seat at the meeting, I couldn't see that people were so much in favor of it as expressing, well, that's something they can live with. It would certainly be preferable to a completely inappropriate and overreaching petition to rezone all of the lots C2. I would be more inclined to view this as a compromise if we had some assurances or expectation, to Rusty's point, we will not be facing the same thing, that this doesn't set a precedent. We're just going to be going through this on a lot-by-lot basis. It doesn't feel like a compromise when someone gets something they want basically for nothing and aren't willing to make meaningful commitments in return. It's like someone asking for the sun, the moon, and the stars, and then telling you, I'll accept only the moon now, but I reserve the right to come back for the sun and the stars. I don't feel like that's a compromise. With due respect to my neighbors who may find this palatable or even something that they want, I want to revisit why it's really not acceptable. The C0 designation has been in place for as long as people have been buying the Villas of Crow Valley units. Many investigated and relied on that designation. Of course, the city can rezone, but most of us understand it's fair and it's undertaken only after an appropriate balancing of interests and as part of an overall plan with all the stakeholder inputs on the table. Let's review the arguments McCarthy Bush and Pure Hair Studio have made for rezoning. The first, neighborhood amenities. No one asked anybody at the Villas of Crow Valley what amenities they want or need. In fact, the public input was clear on this point. We had all the amenities we want or needed on 53rd, Utica Ridge, and 18th Street within about a quarter mile of our property. Just to name a few, we have several gas stations, many hair salons, quite possibly more restaurants per square mile than any place else in the Quad Cities. To name a few, Hemisphere Bistro, the Pita Pit, Crust, Habaneros, Ross's, Central Standard Burger, McDonald's, Biaggi's Barrel House, Pancheros, Buffalo Wild Wings, Granite City, Texas Roadhouse, Chili's, Red Robin, Los Agaves, Bad Boys Pizza Pub, and the Barrel House. I note none of the other commercial properties within 200 feet of the subject property in the original request provided input for or against. That includes the Blood Bank, R.K. Dixon, and a number of McCarthy Bush properties. They're not stranded in the boonies and they don't lack amenities, but they also go home at night, so they don't have to live with the noise, the light, the litter, and all the other issues that go along with C2 or C1 properties. But this is my home, and when I go out on my deck in the morning with a cup of coffee, I want to hear the birds sing. I don't want to hear somebody asking a customer if they want room for cream in their cup of Starbucks coffee, or a band, or piped-in music. The second issue is what's appropriate for the properties as developed. The subject property borders on 3 residential developments, and our subdivision was a McCarthy Bush development. The other offices to the south of East 56, as developed by McCarthy Bush, are really a blend of C0 and C1, predominantly offices. So my point is there's not a McDonald's or a gas station or a used car lot immediately on the other side of the street of this particular property. And I really don't think that it's appropriate to rezone to C2 or C1 as it exists in that corner. The other arguments, well, it'll be a premium development and no one intends a McDonald's, Barrel House, or other undesirable C1 uses. But Matt Flynn, who's been great, by the way, confirmed the city can't differentiate between undesirable and desirable C1 uses. A restaurant is a restaurant, whether it's an Indigo Cafe or a McDonald's. A bar is a bar, whether it's a wine bar or a biker bar. Another argument is that McCarthy Bush has had trouble finding a C0 buyer. There are a number of 1- and 2-story office buildings that McCarthy Bush is putting up on its property zone C2, and I really just don't believe that that's a justification for the rezoning. I suspect lower price or offering incentives can resolve that issue. Other arguments, this would really help Pure Hair Salon or the Pure Hair Studio with synergistic uses. I really don't think improving the profitability of the Pure Hair Studio is a justification for the rezoning. As someone said last week at the information meeting, we have a little tail wagging a very big dog. In sum, I really believe that rezoning solely to boost the profit margin of McCarthy Bush and the Pure Hair Studio is not fair or appropriate. I do think it sets a bad precedent in general, and for this property in particular. But if the proposed plan does go through, we are in the unfortunate position of identifying the most likely leaks in the dike and finding ways to plug them. And so, if the Plan and Zoning Commission nevertheless gives this a green light, I ask that you please incorporate in the approved zoning restrictions as follows. Restricting the restaurant and bar use to 2,000 square feet. Pure Hair Studio has indicated it's an 8,000 square foot building. They would occupy the center 4,000 with 2,000 square feet on each side for retail, bar, or restaurant. So limiting those uses to 2,000 square feet, we believe, would at least put some brakes on the higher intensity that we're exposing ourselves to. We'd also ask that they limit outdoor seating to 200 square feet, restrict hours to no later than 11 p.m., no drive-through, and no live music outdoors. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Good evening. My name's Connie Jones. I live at 4237 East 58 in the Villas. I think I want to share just a couple of takeaways from the last week's meeting. I think those are important in my mind, kind of set the framework here. The one thing that happened is the residents came out loud and clear, and I know, Mr. Chairman, you said we're not here to talk about the CO zoning, but I think that was the premise for the compromise. I think many of the neighborhood residents, myself included, are willing to go along with this compromise, but we want to maintain that CO buffer around our homes. Many of us purchased in that way, but we're willing to compromise on this small lot, trying to be good neighbors and also good stewards economic development-wise. If we're back here again in front of you, that will mean shame on me for agreeing to allow this lot to be rezoned, because then, as Patricia said, we will have compromised and gotten nothing in return. Secondly, I think the other thing that happened at that meeting was we were there for a couple hours, a lot of dialogue, as you would expect, particularly around the eating and drinking establishments. So quite candidly, I think there is a fear that that parcel could turn into some of the late-night establishments that exist south of 53rd or along that more commercial corridor. So I do have also a request similar to Jim's, as well as Patricia's, that if you move forward with this petition, if you would be so willing to take into consideration possibly adding a restriction for hours of use for eating and drinking establishment, that would be more commensurate with the character of the nearby neighborhoods, both our villas at Crow Valley as well as, we have some folks here from Lakehurst tonight as well. So we would certainly appreciate that. That would protect our interest and show good faith on your part that we compromised and, are going to protect ourselves in the process. So appreciate your consideration for that use restriction, and this being my first time in front of this commission. I don't envy the job you do day in and day out, so I'd just like to say thank you for serving the citizens of Davenport. Thank you.
Thank you. Next. Seeing none. Commissioners, any questions? Oh, please come up.
Greg Bush, McCarthy Bush, 4232 East 59th Street. I really did not intend to speak, but I felt I should at least say something from what I perceived as someone. I'm not an attorney, so I won't be near as eloquent as the previous speaker, but I feel like that was quite a mischaracterization of what happened a week ago. I felt like when we go into this, we listened. We actually talked about many different options, including not taking CO in specifically Patricia's backyard and leaving it CO. In other words, we looked at subdividing in many different ways talked about a lot of options. We talked about fencing, we talked about berming, and I felt it was a good exchange. I mean, as you can imagine, there are some people that no matter what you do is not going to be enough, and there are other people that look at it and go, they're trying, they're working with us, let's see what we can do, and it becomes somewhat of a compromise. We looked at it. As near as we can tell, it'll be a minimum of 600 feet between anything that would be noise producing or anything like that, not to mention those trees are well bermed there. And they're correct, we did not commit to not coming back, but we also had good talk about the things that can be done to mitigate. And I don't doubt, I'm a neighbor there, I live there. I have a brother that lives there, I have a sister that lives there. We're very proud of that subdivision, we're all part of it. So we have a vested stake in our own property values, and the last thing we want to see is that depreciate too. And we want to do what we can. We're also a good neighbor, and we want to make sure we do the best we can for our neighborhood. So we went in with those restrictions. We didn't unveil them throughout the meeting. We said at the very beginning, once we'd heard everybody, we came up with C1 with those restrictions. It wasn't like we were moving backwards. We felt like we listened to them. The request was made to take more time and go more slowly. That is why we moved to just zone the small lot so that we could have more time. People could see how it developed and be comfortable. And I agree, the best result along the residential is going to be CO, and we're going to work our butts off to try and get that to happen. So it was a good meeting. At the end, there was a general feeling of accomplishing something, and I think we came up with a reasonable plan from both the developer standpoint and the neighbor standpoint, and I stand on both sides. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional speakers? Last call. Commissioners, any additional questions? Commissioner Manus?
Thank you. First of all, my computer just went dead, and I wanted to go back and look at the staff recommendations again. And could you also please review what the comp plan, the comp plan designations and the proposed zoning map designations for this area? I know that's draft, it's proposed, but I'm just wanting to know what the map does show for this area.
You might have me for a loss on that one. I can't, at least for the proposed map. I believe that we showed it as office, at least on our initial draft.
Okay.
But I can go up to the podium and answer some of the other questions.
Okay, if you could just review the recommendations again, the conditions.
The first one, let's talk about the comprehensive plan, residential general, and similar to the Portillo's discussion, residential general, the previous comprehensive plan talked about having neighborhood compatible commercial uses within a certain walking distance of your house. It really didn't give a locational criteria for that. What we find in the city of Davenport is neighborhoods tend to be relatively homogeneous, and putting a neighborhood store in the middle of a homogeneous neighborhood would not be a good thing. And so what we started to do when we looked at amending the comprehensive plan a couple years ago is saying, yes, we recognize that neighborhoods are relatively homogeneous, and we want to have amenities. People want to have amenities that they can walk to and be within close distance to, but we would like to see those closer to the edge of that neighborhood. And in those circumstances, it could be that a neighborhood scale commercial use could be compatible with that area. Certainly, an argument can be made that Utica Ridge could be that edge of a neighborhood. You see it over here, possibly, but major roads can be an edge. And so what we looked at is, having a large-scale C2 development really didn't fit that criteria for the neighborhood commercial. But when it got scaled back and pushed closer to that edge, it's staff's opinion that it did achieve consistency in the current land use plan. So limited retail or commercial neighborhood services could be allowable in the residential general classification. And these would be the uses that would be excluded.
And this is through the neighborhood meeting and working with staff and the potential developer? owner?
Yes, these are the ones that staff has recommended. I think you've heard additional from neighborhood certainly, but these are the ones that staff is providing a recommendation for.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Commissioner Med, earlier I think you wanted to speak. Did you have something you?
I think it was answered, but I guess I do have one question. And so there's really no way this commission can add any more restrictions that we're hearing tonight.
We can.
We can. But we can't just start spot picking those restrictions that people have brought up and putting them on there. I mean, that, I can understand that wouldn't work.
The process is you would have to make a motion, it would have to be seconded, it would have to be voted on to be added to staff's condition.
And that really should have happened at the neighborhood meeting. They should have gotten all those in there, probably. I mean, so that's all I had.
Thank you.
Answered it.
Any additional questions from commissioners? Take a vote, please.
Connell?
Yes.
Let's see. Johnson?
Yes.
Kelly?
No.
Manus?
No.
Med?
No.
Reinhartz?
No.
Tallman, yes. The motion fails. 3, 4, and 4 against.
Thank you. We'll move on to our next, it'll be new business.
That was with 1 abstention, too. Excuse me.
Thank you.
Last case is a new business, case number F18-09, being a request of Obros LLC, a final plat of Eastern Avenue Farms, 5th Edition, located east of 61st Street, a third mile east of Eastern Avenue, containing 47 residential lots on 18.39 acres, more or less. The property is zoned R2, low-density dwelling district. Staff recommends the Planning and Zoning Commission accept the listed findings and forward case number F18-09 to the City Council with recommendation for approval subject to the following 5 listed conditions, and I so move.
Second.
Case number F 18-09 has been moved and seconded for discussion. Ryan?
This is just another phase of the Eastern Avenues development, property zoned R2, which is lower density residential density on the comprehensive plan. I wanted to orient it so it was in its correct location, but similarly developed to the subdivision to the west. So staff is recommending approval, as Commissioner Tallman had mentioned, with those 5 conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Commissioners, any questions? Would anybody in the audience like to speak for or against this petition? Seeing none, roll call, please. Oh, sorry. Didn't see you back in the corner. Sorry.
My name is Mike Janisek. Work for IMEG. We did the surveying, engineering, and plating on the project. I'd be happy to answer any of your engineering or plating or surveying questions. So I just want to let you know I'm here in case you do have those questions.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Sorry I didn't see you. Commissioners, any questions? Would anybody else like to speak? Now seeing none, roll call, please.
Johnson.
Yes.
Kelly.
Yes.
Manus.
Yes.
Med.
Yes.
Quinn.
Yes.
Reinhardt.
Yes.
Tallman, yes. And Connell.
Yes.
Motion carries and concludes the report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Tallman. It appears as though we've got 5 future business items for our meeting on July 31st. Any additional communication from anybody in the audience? Any additional business?
Move to adjourn.
Second. Move to adjourn. All in favor, signify by.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you for your attendance.